She made a mistake that nearly destroyed her life and career, but no one knew it would be just the beginning of an unexpected journey. After losing everything she holds dear, a unique opportunity presents itself. But will she have the courage to face her past and risk everything for one last chance at redemption? Discover how a seemingly irreparable mistake can turn into the greatest triumph of a person's life. Prepare for a story of overcoming obstacles that will amaze you until the very last. Second, we all make mistakes. Some are small, others leave deep scars. But there is a certain type of mistake that, when it happens, feels like it becomes the mark we carry throughout our lives. Sometimes, these failures don't just affect the present. They define the future, changing our trajectory in an irreversible way. And when we look back, it feels like everything could have been different if we had made another decision, if we had acted differently. This was the mistake Valéria made. A mistake that not only affected her personally, but also shook her career, the trust of the people closest to her, and, above all, her own self-esteem. Valéria was no different from many people who, throughout their lives, face difficult choices. Young, ambitious, and full of dreams, she was at the peak of her career. She had earned the respect of her colleagues, built a good reputation, and was about to achieve the recognition she so desperately wanted. But, like many of us, she made an impulsive decision, a thoughtless choice that seemed harmless at the time, but whose consequences would prove to be catastrophic. The mistake? A contract signed without proper verification. A simple mistake, perhaps? To most, yes. But for Valéria, it meant losing the trust of influential people in her life. A failure that would not be easily forgiven. What seemed like a small administrative error quickly turned into a scandal, compromising her credibility in the position she had worked so hard to attain. That was a fatal blow to her career. Valéria saw her co-workers distance themselves, contracts disappear, and, over time, she was left behind, like a shadow of what could have been. The immediate reaction was brutal. The phone rang incessantly, but each call brought bad news. Her email inbox was flooded with messages, all of them filled with criticism, reminders of the mistake she had made. The words that echoed in her mind were, "You should have done it differently," and "How could you be so careless?" Her life, personally and professionally, had crumbled around her, and she didn't know how to piece it all back together. Each step she took felt like a reminder of her failure. How could she move forward when all she could see was the weight of a past that could not be changed? She found herself reliving the scene where she signed that contract without due verification, thinking about the things she should have said, the questions she should have asked, the signals she had ignored. Regret was like poison in her veins, poisoning every thought, corroding her ability to make clear decisions. At home, the situation was no different. She couldn't hide what she was feeling. The weight of guilt seemed to overflow in every interaction. Conversations with friends and family, once light and full of laughter, now felt strained and awkward. The distractions she used to escape felt even emptier. Deep down, she knew she couldn't run from herself. The guilt was there, in every forced smile, every nervous gesture. Every new day felt like a reminder that the only thing keeping her connected to the world was shame, as if she were living in an invisible prison, built from a mistake she couldn't undo. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had become a failure, that the woman she once was gone. And every time she looked in the mirror, she saw someone weaker, incapable of fixing what she had done. The reflection staring back at her wasn't the confident leader she once was. It was someone broken, unable to right her wrongs. It wasn't just a failure of others' trust. It was the failure to trust herself. And this realization made everything worse. How could she trust herself after making such a mistake? How could anyone, even herself, trust someone so flawed? The weight of guilt was overwhelming. Yet at the same time, it was a constant reminder that Valéria was still alive, still had the chance to do something about it. It was a silent scream, saying that she had Failed, yes, but that failure didn't define her. She didn't want to be just the woman who made a mistake. She wanted to be the woman who overcame it. But that path to redemption was torturous, because there was always something stopping her from taking the next step. The fear of failing again. And so, the weight of guilt became even harder to bear, mixing with doubt and regret, creating a sense of helplessness that accompanied her at all times. Every decision she made seemed like another attempt to erase the stain she carried on her chest. But the more she tried to move on, the bigger that shadow grew, consuming every part of her life. She knew that in order to move forward, she would need to confront the pain, face the consequences of her actions, and accept that the only way out was to forgive herself first. Valéria couldn't escape the echo of what she had done. Every step she took, every decision she made, seemed weighed down by the shadow of a mistake that relentlessly pursued her. When she woke up in the morning, the weight of guilt was already there, waiting for her, ready to settle in like an invisible chain, crushing her hopes and optimism. She tried to move forward, but it felt like the walls in her mind were on the verge of collapsing, pressed by the memories of her failure. It was a silent torment, an internal battle that no one else could see, but that consumed every piece of her energy. During meetings, when she should have been focused and decisive, her mind wandered, trapped in a spiral of regret. She found herself reliving the moment when she signed that contract without proper verification, thinking about the things she should have said, the questions she should have asked, the signs she had ignored. Regret was like poison in her veins, intoxicating every thought, eroding her ability to think clearly. When she looked into the eyes of her colleagues, she saw something she could no longer hide: distance. The trust she had built was now shattered, and nothing she did seemed to be enough to restore it. Their words, though polite and professional, felt hollow, as if they were speaking to a version of her that no longer existed. It was like the Valéria they knew had disappeared, replaced by someone incapable of being trusted. At home, the situation was no different. She couldn't hide what she was feeling. The weight of guilt seemed to overflow in every interaction. Conversations with friends and family, which used to be lighthearted and full of laughter, now felt strained. The distractions she used to forget were even emptier. Deep down, she knew she couldn't escape from herself. The guilt was there, in every forced smile, every nervous gesture. Each new day, she felt that the only thing keeping her connected to the world was shame, as though she were living in an invisible prison made from a mistake she couldn't undo. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had become a failure, that the woman she once was had vanished. The more she tried to move forward, the heavier the weight of guilt became. How could she continue when all she could see was the weight of a past she couldn't change? But the guilt wasn't just a heavy burden. It was also a constant reminder. It reminded Valéria that, even though she was hurt and broken, she was still alive, still had something to prove. It was a silent cry that told her, "You have failed, yes, but you are not defined by it." She didn't want to be just the woman who made a mistake. She wanted to be the woman who overcame it. But that desire for redemption was torturous, because there was always something holding her back: the fear of failing again. And so, the weight of guilt grew even more unbearable, mixing with doubt and regret, creating a sense of helplessness that followed her at all times. Every decision she made seemed like another attempt to erase the stain she carried. But the more she tried to move forward, the bigger that shadow grew, overtaking her life. She knew that to move on, she would need to confront the pain, face the consequences, and accept that the only way forward was to forgive herself first. The impact was instant, like the ground beneath her feet turning to quicksand. Valéria's fall was a silent crash, something no one else saw coming, but she felt it with a devastating intensity. Everything she had worked for, every step she had taken with such effort, crumbled before her eyes in the blink of an eye. Her career, which once seemed to be climbing higher and higher, was now being consumed by the consequences of a simple mistake, yet a catastrophic one. When the scandal broke, It was like an unbearable weight crashing down on her. It wasn't an explosive piece of news, but rather a collection of small details that came to light, revealing negligence, a lack of caution. The trust of her colleagues disappeared, and with it, the security she had in her own worth. The words they spoke to her, though polite, felt empty, as if they were talking to someone who no longer existed. The respect she once held now seemed like a distant memory. The reactions came quickly. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, but every call brought bad news. The emails kept flooding in, each one a reminder of her mistake, each one filled with criticism. The words that echoed in her mind were, "You failed, Valéria. We can't trust you anymore." Those words became her constant torment. The guilt from the failure wasn't just about the professional consequences. It was about how it affected everything she had ever built, how it destroyed her reputation and the trust of those who had supported her. When she entered meetings, it felt like a trial. No matter what she said or did, everything seemed hollow, like she was speaking in a foreign language. Eyes that once saw her as a confident leader now viewed her with skepticism. No matter how hard she tried, her efforts were met with resistance. Her colleagues no longer looked at her the same way. What seemed like an administrative error had now become a reflection of something much deeper, a personal rupture that no one had seen coming. But it wasn't just the professional downfall that weighed on her. Her personal life felt equally affected. Relationships that once seemed unbreakable were now strained, and Valéria found herself alone in the midst of it all. The people who used to stand by her side now kept their distance, their faces a mix of disappointment and pity. Her mistake, once something that seemed easily fixable, had now shattered the very fabric of her relationships. The reality of her fall hit her hardest when she looked in the mirror. She no longer saw the strong, confident woman she once was. Instead, she saw someone broken, someone who had failed, and now had to face the consequences. The woman who had once been in control of her life now felt helpless, questioning every step she had ever taken. She had become a version of herself that she didn't recognize. The guilt and shame consumed her, making it even harder to imagine a way out. How could she continue when everything she had worked for had crumbled? Her fall wasn't just about the public scandal or the lost opportunities. It was about the destruction of her very identity. Valéria didn't just lose her position. She lost herself in the process. She was now facing a question that seemed impossible to answer. Could she ever rebuild? Or was this the end of the line? Valéria felt like she was on the edge of a cliff. The weight of guilt and the wound left by her fall were deeply embedded in her soul, and no matter how hard she tried to rise again, it felt like something was constantly dragging her back down. But amid all the chaos and pain, something unexpected happened. It came in the form of an email, seemingly simple, yet carrying with it a weight that Valéria could never have anticipated. The subject was clear: an incredible opportunity to reclaim a project she had led years ago, a chance to reorganize an entire division of the company she had once helped build. At first, she couldn't believe it. How could she, the woman who had failed so spectacularly, now be offered a chance to lead again? It felt like a cruel joke, but it wasn't. The offer didn't come from someone she expected, but from the CEO of the company, someone who knew the true Valéria, someone who understood her capacity, but also her flaws. What stood out to her was the tone of confidence in his message, as though he was offering her not just a chance to fix her mistake, but to fully redeem herself. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a mission, a challenge. The company was on the brink of entering a turbulent, competitive market, and the CEO believed that Valéria, despite her past failure, still had what it took to lead the team to success. The opportunity was clear. She would be responsible for turning around a critical situation, using everything she had learned through her mistakes, including the ones from her past. However, this opportunity didn't come without its risks. Valéria was fully aware that by accepting, she was placing herself under immense pressure. She would once again be judged, not just by others, but by herself. The mistake she had made was still fresh in her mind, and the fear of failing again was overwhelming. But the other path, the easier one, was to simply walk away, to accept the failure and retreat from this world of high stakes where she no longer felt capable. But the temptation to give up was stronger than ever. Taking the easy way out meant letting go of everything, letting go of the chance to prove that she was more than her mistakes. But something inside her rebelled against that choice. She couldn't walk away from this, not after everything she had been through. She needed to face this challenge, to rise above her fear, and prove that the mistake was just a part of her story, not the end of it. Valéria knew that to move forward, she had to risk everything. But there was something else she realized. By accepting this opportunity, she wasn't just trying to fix the past. She was building a future that would surpass anything she had dreamed of before. It was her chance to transform the failure into something monumental. There was no going back now. This was the moment where everything could change. The moment had arrived. Valéria felt as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown, having to choose between two paths that both seemed equally terrifying. The decision before her wasn't just about a work project. It was about her identity and what she would be willing to risk or lose forever. What seemed like an opportunity for redemption now became the greatest challenge of her life, the ultimate test of her ability to rise again. She knew that accepting the invitation to lead the project would place immense pressure on her. Not only would she have to prove herself to others, but she would also have to prove herself to herself. The failure of her past still haunted her, and the fear of falling again was overwhelming. Could she really step back into the leadership role? Could she restore the trust that had been shattered? She could feel the weight of every expectation pressing on her shoulders, but the fear of failing again was paralyzing. The other path, the easier one, was to simply give up, to accept the failure and retreat from the high-stakes world that she no longer felt fit to navigate. It was a tempting choice. There would be no more surprises, no more risks. The fear of failure would be replaced by the comfort of knowing that she wouldn't have to fight anymore. She could walk away from the chaos, from the pressure, from the chance of another fall. But deep down, Valéria knew that choosing the easy path would be the greatest failure of all. It wasn't just about avoiding more pain. It was about giving up on everything she had worked for, everything she had learned. Valéria realized that she could not allow herself to live with the regret of never trying. The easy way out would mean giving in to the very doubts and insecurities that had kept her stuck for so long. It was time to face them head-on, to push through the fear and take the risk. Because if she didn't take the chance now, she would forever wonder what could have been. So, Valéria made the choice. She chose the harder road, the one that required courage and faith in herself. She wasn't just accepting a new job or a new project. She was accepting the challenge of proving that failure doesn't define who you are. The decision was clear. It was time to risk everything and try again. Time to rebuild, to rise from the ashes, and to show the world and herself that she could still succeed, no matter the odds. The beginning was tough, harder than Valéria had imagined. By accepting the challenge, she wasn't just putting herself back into the spotlight. She was facing a solitary journey of reclaiming herself, rediscovering who she was, and reintegrating into a world that, in some ways, had already rejected her. The fight for redemption wouldn't be a straight line. It would be a winding road filled with obstacles, where each wrong move could destroy everything she was working for. But she was determined to press on, to build her own truth, step by step. She started the project with a single goal in mind: to regain the trust of the people around her. But soon, she realized that this task was not as simple as she had thought. It wasn't enough to just deliver results. She had to show others, and herself, that she was worthy of the trust they were placing in her. Every meeting, every conversation with her team, was a test. They looked at her with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Many still didn't believe she could succeed. After all, how could someone who had made such a significant mistake be trusted again? Every day she worked harder, It wasn't about showing she was capable of what she had done before. It was about showing who she had become. She was the first to arrive and the last to leave. She wasn't worried about failing this time. She was focused on giving everything she had to make things right, to prove that this was more than just a chance to save her career. It was a chance to prove to herself that she could be the leader she had always wanted to be. With each small success, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Every well-done task, every decision she made that brought positive results was another step toward her redemption. People began to notice her transformation, although with some skepticism. Some were slower to accept her back, but others started to see the true change in her attitude, in her commitment, and most importantly, in the way she treated others. But the process of overcoming wasn't just about external validation. There were days when Valéria woke up feeling the overwhelming pressure of her insecurities. She looked in the mirror and still saw the woman who carried the weight of her mistakes. Doubt was a constant companion. She wondered if she was truly capable of maintaining this newfound composure, if the results were merely a reflection of temporary effort. She still doubted her own ability to succeed, and the temptation to give up everything was strong. But over time, she began to learn something crucial. The true redemption didn't come just from regaining others' trust. It came from finding peace within herself. The mistakes she had made no longer defined her. It became the motivation for her growth. She wasn't just the woman who failed. She was the woman who rose above it, who turned her pain into strength. And as she realized this, she began to see herself as the leader she had always aspired to be. Not perfect, but real, capable of learning from her failures and growing stronger because of them. Ultimately, Valéria's struggle for redemption wasn't just about fixing her mistake. It was about transcending the pain, accepting her flaws, and embracing her journey of growth. She wasn't striving for perfection. She was striving to be authentic, to be someone who could rise above her own limitations, and by doing so, show others that true greatness is born not from perfection, but from the ability to rise after every fall. The journey wasn't easy. Every step Valéria took toward redemption seemed to be followed by 2 steps backward, as if the world was constantly testing her resilience. But little by little, something began to change. The hard work, the constant effort, and the unwavering determination started to pay off, one small victory at a time. It was during a regular meeting, while presenting one of the projects she was leading, that Valéria noticed the first significant change. Her team's response was different this time. It was no longer distant or hesitant approval. There was enthusiasm, engagement, even smiles of approval from some team members who had previously been cautious around her. That moment didn't go unnoticed. Valéria could feel it in her bones. She was finally being seen, not as the woman who had failed, but as the woman who was rising again and making things happen. But it wasn't until the CEO, the person who had once believed in her and was now one of her most critical supporters, publicly praised her that she truly felt the shift. During a presentation about the progress of the project, he called her up in front of the entire board and acknowledged her leadership. Valéria is not just an exceptional professional. She's proof that when you have the courage to learn from your mistakes, you can achieve success that many think is unattainable. She has been an inspiration to all of us. He said with sincerity Valéria had never imagined she would hear. Those words were like a weight being lifted off her shoulders. The recognition didn't come from a title or a formality. It came from respect. Genuine, earned respect. Valéria realized that, at last, her tireless effort, her dedication, and her internal transformation were being acknowledged. She wasn't just seen as the woman who failed. She was seen as the woman who was becoming something stronger, something greater than she had ever been before. As time went on, victories began to accumulate. Projects that had once seemed impossible to accomplish were now being executed efficiently. The team worked with more unity and confidence, and the company's results started to stand out in the market. Valéria, who had once been seen with suspicion, was now a respected figure, a leader with a clear vision and unshakable strength. She had built something solid, something real, and her actions began to speak louder than any words could. The turning point had arrived, and as she got closer to success, Valéria realized something even more important. It wasn't just about the professional success she had gained. It was about who she had become. She had transformed, not just professionally, but personally. She had turned pain into fuel, failure into learning, and most importantly, she had shown herself and the world that true victory wasn't about perfection. It was about the courage to face failure and rise again, stronger than before. That moment was not a singular event. It was a continuous process of effort, bravery, and resilience. It was a transformation that began within her and radiated outward in everything she did. Valéria was no longer just the woman who made a mistake in the past. She was now the woman who had overcome it all and emerged victorious, not just because she succeeded, but because she refused to be defined by her failures. She was a living example of what can happen when you choose to rise, no matter how many times you fall. The sun seemed to shine a little brighter that day. Valéria stood there, at the pinnacle of everything she had achieved, looking back with a serene smile and a sense of complete fulfillment. What once seemed impossible just months ago, when she was buried in her mistake and shame, was now her reality. She had reached a place she never imagined, but not in the way she expected. It wasn't just about conquering a challenge or reclaiming her position. It was about who she had become. When Valéria started her journey of redemption, she was simply trying to fix a mistake, trying to regain the trust of her team, her colleagues, and most importantly, herself. But what she didn't realize was that, in doing so, she wasn't just restoring what she had lost. She was creating something new, something she never imagined before, a new level of success, where true glory came from her transformation. The great success wasn't just in the numbers or the projects she delivered with excellence. It wasn't just in the respect she now earned from everyone around her. The real success was in how she, with her strength, resilience, and courage, had overcome everything that had once brought her down. She didn't just fix the mistake. She reinvented herself. She proved to the world, and most importantly to herself, that no matter how great the fall, there is always a chance to rise again. Today, Valéria is no longer the woman who made a mistake. She is the woman who, after falling, had the strength to not only recover, but surpass everything she had before. She didn't just restore her career, her position, and her respect. She restored her confidence. And that, my friends, is the greatest triumph anyone can achieve. Today, she is a living proof that, when we face our greatest challenges with courage and faith in ourselves, success goes beyond what the eyes can see. Success is internal. It's the restored trust in oneself. It's the peace that comes from knowing we did our best, even when it seemed impossible. Valéria didn't just regain her position, her career, or her respect. She regained herself, something she would never lose again. And that, truly, is the greatest triumph of all. If you were inspired by this story of redemption, don't forget to give a like to show you believe in the power of transformation and growth. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do so now to follow more emotional stories like this one that will touch your heart and motivate your own journey of change.